Okay, so 5 tips for No Rest for the Wicked. Starting off with, you should definitely be exploring everywhere you can and picking up as many consumable items as you can. You will die a lot in this game, and you're going to need a bunch of health items, especially if you are to get past the first boss. So make sure you're gathering all the mushrooms, all of the herbs, especially the herbs, because I find that generally I'll run out of the herbs before the mushrooms. Additionally, make sure you're gathering all of the soil, trees, fish, and also the mining. Make sure you gather as many of those as you can. It's really, really important because once you make it to town, without too many spoilers, I promise you will use every single bit of those resources that you gather. So make sure you're not walking past them. I know the gathering can be tedious at times, but I promise you it's 100% worth it. On that same vein, make sure that you explore as much as you can. Basically, treat this game like Elden Ring. They have hid a chest, they have hid a loot drop pretty much in every single corner. I promise if you walk through that waterfall, there will be a chest behind it. If you go into that cave, there will be a chest in it. There's almost always loot. There's so much loot in this game. It's absolutely nuts. And you're going to want to get as much loot as you can because eventually you're going to want to sell it because repairs eventually will cost money. And if you don't have all the loot to sell, you're going to go broke from doing all your repairs. So make sure you're looting every corner. There is a ton of loot on the map. It's just everywhere. So additionally, take the verticality of this game into account. You can climb up walls, climb across beams, and you will find loot on top of towers and stuff as well. Okay, so a lot of people are having a ton of issues with the combat in this game and saying it's too hard. And to some extent, I'd say it is pretty punishing, but the combat gets a lot easier if you treat it what it is, a Souls-like and not an ARPG. So I'd say that my top tips for combat is make sure that you're using a shield and blocking a ton. You can block with 200 or two-handed weapons as well, but I don't think it works as well. But blocking is insane. It'll stagger the enemy unless they shield bash you, which most enemies don't shield bash you. If you block, it will stagger the enemy, and then you can get in like a heavy hit or at least a couple light hits. You can also parry. It's a little bit harder than blocking. I'd say that like for the majority of like Andes or whatever, blocking is the easiest thing. But you can also do like perfect parries where you use your left trigger and just do that right before they attack. I have found the timing to be a little bit weird though, and blocking is just a lot more reliable. But like with some bosses, for example, you can't block, they'll just break your poise and go straight through it, so you have to do perfect parries on them. But really, you got to use blocking as much as you can. It makes everything so much easier. I promise, like, I was struggling a ton with the combat, and once I figured out like how to block, it just made the combat so much easier, and I barely die nowadays, honestly. Unless I go up against like a strong boss, I'm not dying to the normal creatures because I'm blocking and staggering them and then taking a couple hits and then repeating. So additionally, make sure that you're backstabbing. Backstabbing is really, really strong. I find that the window for backstabbing is a little bit weird, and like it seems like there's some bosses that you can't backstab. I'm not quite sure how that works yet, but it does do a ton of damage. It's sort of just like Dark Souls. You have to like roll behind the enemy or go behind them when they're stunned or when they just attacked, and then you get the sort of killing animation and you do a ton of damage. And it does feel finicky. I think they need to make the window for backstabbing a little bit bigger, but again, if they did, then the game also might be a little bit more trivialized. So it might be okay right now, just take some more practice. But make sure that you're backstabbing. You can sneak with your left triggers to try to get behind people for backstabbing. But I promise the combat gets easier. You just got to stick with it, die over and over and over again, and get used to it. I mean, in the first area, repairing is free. So, practice as much as you can before you get to town. Additionally, make sure you're not forgetting to use your runes. Your runes are pulled up by either your right button or your left button, and they can be really, really strong depending on what rune you have on your weapon. Additionally, eventually you'll be able to slot your own runes, and you can get like healing runes, stuff like that, that takes focus and then it heals you up. So that's extremely strong as well. But your runes can do a ridiculous amount of damage. I have a rune right now on my hammer that is like it throws the hammer, makes it a projectile, and it's like flaming, and it does fire damage as well. And it does a ton of poise damage too. And this rune has been instrumental in being able to take down bosses because the poise damage will stun them, and then I can go in to get some good hits on them as well. And then generally, if I get enough hits on them, my focus bar will be full again, and then we can do the whole throw the hammer again with our focus bar. So make sure you're using your runes. It's definitely worth it, and you're going to be at a huge disadvantage if you're not using them pretty consistently. And then, of course, we have dodging, everyone's favorite mechanic in Souls games. I used to dodge a lot in this game, and honestly, while it is really strong, especially for gaining your stamina back, I'd be really careful when dodging instead of blocking because a lot of, and even just enemies, it's not just bosses in this game, have the delayed attack that Elden Ring sort of popularized. And dodging sometimes won't actually dodge the delayed attacks from the enemies. So I think blocking is more consistent, but dodging definitely has a place. And additionally, on that note, I definitely suggest putting some of your attribute points into stamina. Your base stamina in this game is really, really, really bad. And if you just put like a few points into stamina, it actually makes a huge difference. You can roll a lot more. You can do like full weapon combos without running out of stamina. It's definitely worth it. I promise, like the extra damage you'll gain from the few points that you put into stamina instead of your main like scaling attribute, 100% worth it. Definitely put some points into stamina. So on the topic of consumables, make sure that you're actually using them. It's not like other games where they're hard to find because chests regenerate in this game. That's what the Fog of War is. You can always go back and regather the chests that you got before, and those chests will have a ton of consumables in them. So blade oil, focus vial potions. Honestly, I found focus vial potions to be the most important because focus is so important for using your different rune abilities. But focus vial potions, stamina potions, all those, you get a ton of them. Make sure you're using them. There's no reason not to. They buff you up, they soup you up, they make you better. And I find that I'm running out of food more than I run out of those consumables. But if you use those consumables, then you'll use less food because you'll be doing more damage and killing things quicker and taking less damage yourself. So don't hoard your consumables. Use them, especially like you can use scrap bombs on big groups of enemies. Stuff like, especially like if you don't have an AoE on your attack, just use your consumables. I promise you it's worth it. Alright, so personally, I would actually save some of your attribute points. If we go into stats, you can see I have 13 attribute points saved up, and there's a reason for this. I've only put a few into health and stamina, and then a little bit into strength and faith as well, and that was so I can use the hammer that I'm using. But the reason that I'm saving my attribute points is in case of getting items like this. So I found this Midnight Blade on one of the quests, like one of the challenge quests or bounty hunters. And I'm not going to spec into this, but it's items like these that makes me say that you should definitely save your stat points. Because what if this was like an amazing legendary that I wanted to use and I couldn't because I didn't have enough stats and the right things for it. So 16 on the dexterity and 16 on the intelligence to use this. It has all four runes, and it does a bunch. It has a bunch of modifiers as well. So very, very cool, unique item. I would highly recommend waiting to stat into something until you find one of these that you want to use. So yeah, just be careful. I don't know of any way of respecing your character at this time. There may be a way, but personally, I don't know about it. So anyways, I'm just warning you, be careful and maybe save your stat points until you find an item that you really, really want to use. Obviously, it's okay to use a few like I did. And I definitely suggest, like I said before, putting some into stamina. And I put some into health too. And I feel like both those really helped me out. But save your stat points. Anyways, you can expect another one of these videos tomorrow, so feel free to subscribe if you want to catch more tips and tricks for No Rest for the Wicked. I'm absolutely loving this game. It is so much fun, and I will be covering this game for the foreseeable future. I've heard that there's not like that much story content left, but there's definitely a ton of like different builds and stuff we can do, so I will be making content on this for a while. So make sure you subscribe to catch all that content. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, let me know in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, guys.